Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on carbon reporting. I'll just give another 30 seconds for people to join. I can see a few people coming in at the moment, and then we'll start today's webinar. All right, I think it's time to start now. People can join as needed as they come along. So, welcome everyone. My name's Andrew Henderson. I work for a company called Speeki, hosting the event today. We're a provider of software and solutions and services around all sustainability topics, not just carbon, but that's what we'll be talking about today. The title or the topic today is really looking at 5 common challenges. So we've been doing this for many years. What we've tried to do is come up with 5 of the most common challenges and talk about how to solve that, predominantly with technology, but I am going to cheat a little bit and talk about some of the non-technology solutions, because the reality is that a lot of what you need to do doesn't have a technology answer. Technology might help enable some of the things you have to do, but technology isn't everything. So we will talk about some of the non-technology solutions to some of these problems, as well as technology. Great. So I know a lot of you probably know why we're here and what we're doing, but I do like to sort of go through some of the background just to make sure everyone is up to speed. I'll try and skip through this reasonably quickly. First question is, why carbon? Why are we talking about carbon at all? And the simple answer, obviously, is that carbon is seen as a driver of climate change. So certain forms of carbon, in terms of what we call greenhouse gases, have been documented by scientists as being a cause of climate change, global warming, however you want to describe it. So carbon has become a focus for governments and therefore for companies to state what they have, what they're emitting, and what they're going to do about it. So some of that's in disclosure requirements, some of that's companies just wanting to do it themselves. So that's why carbon. Why carbon needs to be reported on. Again, I'll skip through this reasonably quickly. Obviously, for some people, it's because you need to do it yourself. You need to manage your own carbon. For some people, it's because you're running some scheme that requires it. But then there's also the more obligatory side of this, which is either reporting out to investors or it's reporting to governments and regulators. So a lot of you I can see are around European companies, so that's the CSRD and its ESRS standard that requires a certain level of reporting. And previously it was things like TCFD and GRI and other sort of topics. So that's what the reason for carbon. In terms of the way we report out on carbon, there's a common accounting protocol, which is the GHG Protocol. That has a process in it that people take step by step. First of all, it defines the scope. What are you trying to achieve? How are you going to get there? Works out how to collect the data, does calculations on the data, checking the calculations with some sort of assurance, then reporting out. Originally, the protocol had its own reporting requirements, but now they're generally superseded by the reporting standards. And then improve. So it's very much like a plan, do, check, act kind of process, that you get your carbon emissions and then you work out what to do about them, and then over time you improve them. So that is the basics of what we're here to talk about. So within this cycle, I've picked out a number of areas that I think are common challenges from working with clients, and we can talk about how to deal with those and what to do about it. All right, first challenge, just getting data. That's often where people start and scratch their heads and they just don't know what to do. Lots of problems in getting data. First of all, not knowing what data is actually needed. If you've never done this before, you don't know what data is needed to do a carbon inventory. Obviously, there's lots of guidance out there. There's the protocol itself. There's a lot of other materials. But that's the first step, working out what data is needed and then looking internally at what you've got. And quite often that data just doesn't exist for various reasons. I mean, data exists in systems for a purpose generally. And if no one in your company has ever needed to report out on carbon, then quite often the data that you need just doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's sitting in various silos in various places. It could be that every site has its own metering system. It could be that every site does its own travel. There could be lots of different problems that need to be addressed. And it's also potentially in lots of different formats. It's certainly not sitting in a nice database. So that's the first problem with carbon accounting, is just getting your hands on data. Right, so how do you deal with that? So the way we tend to do it is sort of take a step back and just work through every scope and every category of scope 3 separately and go, okay, tell me about your business. How do you do it? And each one of them generally needs a different plan. That can be part of technology, but it's generally not a technology solution. Generally, it's just to get your hands on everything you can get when you can get it. So find out what you need and then just grab it. Don't worry about formatting yet, and we'll talk a bit about how to deal with the calculations later. But the key point here is use whatever you've got to make estimates. Estimates is the answer to your first couple of years of carbon accounting. It's just the reality. You won't have perfect data, so you will need to use estimates. But estimates are not just there to fill the gaps. They're really there to help you prioritize. That's the whole point of doing the estimate process, internally at least. Obviously, for reporting, you need to be clear on what is estimate and what is actual. But internally, you've got to focus on those estimates because they really tell you where you need to go and get further data. So if you've got estimate data and it's telling you that a particular scope or a particular part of a scope is the likely largest part of your emissions, that's where you start thinking about getting real data. And there's lots of solutions out there, lots of technology solutions out there for doing that. A lot of smart metering for electricity usage, metering for fuel usage, a lot of things you can do. But I tend to tell clients to really think about whether it's needed because they all cost money. And at the moment, certainly with scrutiny on ESG and sustainability, you've got to justify spending that money. So put a metering system in, either if it's going to be the most significant sort of area of emissions, or you've got some other benefit that you can justify for the smart metering, which can do some sensible energy reduction in addition to just giving you data. So focus on using the data to prioritize. That's really the solution here is using technology wisely. Other than that, taking what you can get, especially if you're in your first year. And most people that we talk to, they've either done their reporting because they were already under the non-financial reporting directive, or they now have probably 2 years, if not more, out of your omnibus delays to get this right. So think about now just using that data internally first, do your prioritization, and don't expect the data to be perfect day one. All right, next challenge is teams. It's getting people to focus on the things that you need them to focus on. Often have lots of discussions about team structure, whether there should be a small group-led team or should it be in the individual business units? If you have a big complex organization, should it be based on sites? What's the best model? And then once you've got the model, what kind of skills do you need? We often see problems when people ask a lot of questions from people in the business because they need the data, but they don't necessarily spend the time on understanding whether the people understand the question, understand what it's going to be used for. And the issue then becomes people just don't bother responding. You don't get that enthusiasm. I've called it enthusiasm, but it's getting that buy-in from the people in the business that you're going to need. So those are problems, and they're not really technology solutions to them. So this is one of those that I don't think is always technology based. In terms of the structure, my general advice is follow your own culture. Don't try and build a sustainability team that is different to how you would run any other cross-organizational team. So focus on thinking about how you do things in your business today and try and follow that. The second thing is training. So people need training. There's no shortage of things that people need to know. That training might be basic awareness kind of training, so getting people understanding the GHG protocol, or what you're going to do with the data, or how your business and strategy align with some of the carbon reporting that you're going to do. So it could be that kind of training, or it could be training on systems, policies, and tools. So actual, in your job, I need you to do these 5 things. Here's how you do those 5 things. So that training really has to be mapped out and clear. So you're getting the information that you need, and people are doing the jobs that they need. This is a common problem that we see, is that people just don't spend time on training. That training can be e-learning kind of training. We provide a lot of e-learning on the standards and the protocols and how to do things. But often it's more personal training on, here's the things I need you to do to support me in my objective, which is to eventually get to carbon reporting. And the third thing is getting buy-in. So this is usually something we get people thinking about early on. If you've got buy-in from senior management, then getting that enthusiasm, getting the support from the more operational people tends to be easier, because you can get them to give a nudge and free those resources. And that becomes important because it's rare that businesses have people doing nothing but carbon reporting. They're usually being picked out because they have access to some data, or they know the farms or the factories or what have you. But they often have their own jobs. So getting senior management to provide the resources because they've understood and they've bought in is essential to getting teams built. All right, the third thing is getting the calculations right. So this is where people often jump straight into. They focus on the calculations. Lots of challenges with calculations, from the very basic things like matching units of data. So whether it's kilowatt hours or megawatt hours, these are the basic kind of things that people often not necessarily get wrong, but if you're not tracking the units all the way through the data collection process, you can have major issues when you're trying to do your calculations. The next thing is understanding the emissions factors, what's available out there, what's important, what's necessary to use in a particular location or industry or jurisdiction. They're good to have access to, but they are complicated. So you need to know which ones to use in what circumstances. Same thing with categorization. So you've got your 15 categories in scope 3, and you've got various items which could fall into scope 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you something like a fuel could be used in transport with your own trucks. It could be used in transport for someone else's trucks. Yeah, lots of different ways of categorizing. That can take some time. So you might have some raw data, but you need to put it in the right bucket so you can report out properly. And then lastly, aggregation. So making sure you can roll up data to a head office if for reporting, while still keeping it at lower levels for some of the activity and action decision making. So those are some of the key problems around getting calculations right. The answer is actually very much technology. All of those things can be dealt with by a good, solid calculation platform. Again, we provide one of those, but there's plenty out there. They sort out the units of data as long as your data entry is right. They usually will work out what the emissions factors and the categorizations are, and they'll allow for aggregation up and down. This is also a key area where artificial intelligence can shine. It's one of those very operational areas where you can get real value and quantifiable value in terms of the amount of time taken and the accuracy by using solutions which use artificial intelligence. This is one of those no-brainers. I'm often a skeptic on artificial intelligence, but I've seen it used in this area, just doing calculations. It's what it's really good at. So make sure if you're going to find a solution and get a calculator, make sure it's got some embedded intelligence in it, really to do all of those sort of understanding of data formats, understanding of units of data, or sort of mapping things. It can do that really well. So that's the answer to this. This is absolutely a technology answer. The next thing is knowing what to report. So this is a bit of a mixture of technology and other things. So the problems here are just knowing, first of all, what the protocol requires, so that sort of initial data gathering and what kind of data, so at what levels. The GHG protocol sort of has that reporting in it. But then it's the reporting standards themselves. So this is where you need to be aware of the requirements of each of those standards, whether it's ESRS, E16 or GRI if you're doing that, or some of the IFRS standards. You need to know exactly what it is because they're all subtly different. So just because you've done your calculation doesn't mean you've got the data in the right structure and the right format for a particular reporting requirement. And then there's all these other things that you want to push the data into, things like SBTI if you want to get your target certified or approved. Yeah, CPD if you want to report out on that kind of platform. Some of your certification bodies like EcoVadis or the ISO standards. So there's a whole lot of other things you might want to do with that data that you really need to be aware of. And again, subtle differences in how you present that data for these various bodies. I mean, over time, they are tending to align, or at least there's a core of similarity. But you do certainly at the moment need to know the differences between the different reporting requirements, totally independent of doing the calculations. So you need to know what data, where to produce the data, who, when, why, and that's often for more of the internal reporting. So if you've got some sort of management committee or sustainability committee, knowing what data they need, when they need it, that kind of thinking is one of these major problems that we often see. They just don't know. People haven't mapped that out. Where they might have done it quite naturally as in a management reporting for financial metrics or for some other area, sustainability needs to be thought about in the same way. In terms of solutions, the easy one is to build a lot of this into the technology that you're using. Making sure you just don't need to think about it. If you've got a platform and it knows that you're reporting out on ESRS and you've got the raw data, get it to do it in that way. And again, AI is great at taking data, converting it into different structures and formats, and publish it in that way. Again, training is necessary. Back to building the teams, also knowing what to report. It comes down to knowing those standards, and training can help there. But the next thing is really thinking about the governance structures. So this should be done at the beginning rather than sort of when you're coming to report. But having policies just telling you exactly what you need to do, who you need to report to, when you need to report, what data, what formats, where you get the data from. All of that should be in your sustainability policies or your carbon management policy. And then it's just a matter of following your own policies and procedures rather than thinking about it at the time of reporting. And in a bigger picture, that's part of your governance model, making sure that those internal reporting is all mapped out and people know exactly what you need to do. Again, some of that's structured using technology, your board sessions and your committee sessions potentially, but it doesn't have to be. It's really just getting it right to avoid the challenges of getting all your data, doing your calculations, and then not knowing what to do with that data. All right, the last big area is tracking performance. So again, doing your calculations year one is the first step. Almost all of the reporting requirements, and certainly the SBTIs, etc., need you to have monitoring and tracking and targets that you're tracking against. So I've included this in the carbon reporting challenge because it's a key part of it. It doesn't stop at the first year. And the key challenge there is, again, getting the data. Now, hopefully it's easier than the first time you've done it because you've known where you've got the data from in the past. But potentially it's the same challenges that you might have got in the data's in silos and the formats, etc. If you've built or procured technology, that makes it all a lot easier. But don't think that the technology solution, the data solution or the data problem goes away once you've got it the first time. Secondly is engagement, making sure that people are giving you that data again and again. You might have begged for it the first time. Doesn't mean that people will be willing to do this on a regular basis, especially if some of the data requirements is on a monthly or a quarterly basis. So making sure you're continuing to engage with people and continuing to get what you need from them. And the third thing here is actually alignment with strategy. So making sure that the performance that you're tracking against adjusts when your strategy adjusts. And this is actually crucial over the long term. We've seen a lot, certainly in the last year or so, where people have made statements on SBTI or public statements and then have backtracked from those for whatever reason. It's important that the performance tracking follows those sort of strategic target setting or strategic statements. So you're adjusting along the way. And that's very much a governance kind of question, making sure that you've got the structure in place so you know when management has changed its strategy and you can realign with that strategy. And that the tracking of performance can realign. So it's not you're tracking a goal that was set last year, which is no longer relevant for the business. In terms of solution, again, technology solutions, you've got the data in the first place. Make sure you're setting your targets in the same place. Make sure you're tracking against your targets in the same place. And this is where you start thinking about automation. So again, the data siloing piece, this is where you're starting to pull data into data lakes, use APIs, use integration. That's where you start to think about that. You don't want to think about that first year. I find it's far too early. You need either the second reporting year or even the third or fourth reporting year. That's when you really understand your data, really understanding what you're trying to get out of the reporting. That's where you start thinking about integrations and automations, etc. As I said, for a lot of the other parts of tracking performance, you need to make sure your awareness, communications, and training is still in place, so people are still aware of what you're doing and also what you're doing with the data. So that becomes, it's a change from I need this data to I still need this data, but this is what we've done with this data. So whether that's actions you've implemented or reductions in emissions that you've managed to achieve, that communication piece becomes quite valuable in the second and third year as you're tracking through this. And it also comes back to sort of value proposition. So again, when you're communicating, you're able to tell the value to your business. You're not just saying, oh, we gathered this data and we made these calculations, because that's actually not valuable to most people. They need to see something much more tangible, either business growth, if you're actually moving into products that are able to sell on their sustainability credentials, or cost saving if you're reducing energy usage, or some other sort of value that you're able to define up front and then show progress against. And lastly, it's really a maturity discussion for performance tracking. So making sure you're not just tracking your emissions performance over time, you're also tracking your maturity as an organization around both environmental carbon type things and sustainability in general. So showing some progress more broadly against all sorts of topics. So that's what I'd normally be suggesting around tracking performance and how to achieve that with some of the challenges that are always going to be there. All right, so finally, we've got a few minutes. These are the key takeaways. So first of all, build the governance structure. I say that to everyone when we start any project. What's the structure in place? Have you got the people? Have you got the remits, and those people know what they're doing? Have they been trained before you even start thinking about gathering data about carbon? Reporting requirements, that's part of the governance often, or it can be broken out. Making that kind of clear. We're focusing on reporting challenges today, so make sure that you document that upfront as part of your policy. Set the goals. That all again falls within that structural governance, but you can use those for communication. So all of this is really upfront kind of work before you start getting into the details. But then it's getting whatever data you can get hold of in the first round of reporting, but use that data wisely. Don't think of it as just reporting data. Use it as guidance internally to what to prioritize, including where you need to get further data. And that becomes part of this ongoing improvement cycle, is constantly looking at the data that you have and whether you need to improve it. That could be by getting systems in place and metering, etc. It could be engaging with suppliers to get scope 3 kind of data. All of those things could be considered, but start with a prioritization first using estimates. Next thing is use artificial intelligence. It has a number of areas where it really excels in this calculation kind of world. There are places where it maybe is a little overhyped at the moment, but this is not one of them, I've found. Don't skimp on training, focus on training, make sure people know why they're doing things, what they have to do, what your expectations are. This is still a brand new area for a lot of people. Do your monitoring, use your systems for that, and then improve over time. So like I've mentioned many times, this is not a perfection first year, probably not a perfection fourth, fifth year. It's an improvement over time. When you're doing your reporting, know your estimates, know your error calculations, and look to reduce those over time. Like I said, most of you are probably not going to need reporting till 27, 28 and beyond, depending on your size. So spend this time getting the groundwork, getting the focus on the things that you're going to need when it does actually come to time. All right, so thank you very much for that. We've got time for some questions, if we have any. No questions at the moment. So unless anything comes up, I normally run over time, so that's quite nice. I'm on time today. I'll wait for another minute or so, but otherwise, thank you all very much for your time. Hopefully it was useful, and please let me know in the feedback anything you'd prefer to see. All the presentation material is available. You can get that from the marketing team. Okay, quick question about AI. So examples of AI. AI can be a lot of the different things. It means a lot of different things to different people. What we're generally talking about here is large language models. So that can be about drafting reporting requirements for you. So taking the standard, taking information about your business and actually drafting things about policies, drafting things about governance structures, etc. But also in the calculation, it's the intelligence that can read things like finance packages. It can read sort of accounting information, and it can work out and categorize what's the spend, what kind of category of spend, what the emission factors will be for that category of spend, and do the calculations for you. And that's really for this carbon reporting, that's what it's all about. It's that automation, some of which could have been done without sort of artificial intelligence, but that ability to really understand language has allowed it to interpret data that was not designed for this purpose. I think that's the key to it. It's allowing you're getting fairly unstructured or structured for other purposes data and transforming it by analysis. It's basically doing what a human would do, but can do it at a far greater speed. All right, I think we're at time now. So thank you all very much. Any other follow-ups, please send me an email or the team and they'll forward it to me. Thank you all for your time.